I'm also going to talking to Michael. A lot of what was mentioned yesterday, Tatsi, Michael, Danny, yeah, I'm going to be kind of talking a lot about what they brought up. So let me start off by saying, 早安，欢迎，我的中文名字是森杰吧。我在香港住11年了，但是我的普通话不太好，所以我要说英文。对不起。So good morning and thanks to everybody for inviting myself and the other speakers to come here and letting us speak and the organizers. We'd like to thank you for that. So it's my pleasure to be here in Taipei to present my topic to you. But I think first it's a good thing, let's go through the actual definitions. I saw someone was making notes yesterday in the program. What is humanism? So the definition of humanism, the noun, is where human values predominate. And as a philosophy, it's something that emphasizes reason, which is surely lacking in this world, scientific inquiry, and human fulfillment. So I want to go into, I almost called my talk the misanthropic humanist. So, but I figured a lot of people don't know what misanthrope means. So it's a noun. It means a hater of humankind. So I'm going to quote, think of how stupid the average person is on an IQ bell curve. You know, on 100, the average. Just think of how dumb that average person is. And then realize half of them are stupider than that. Now that's not my quote. That's from George Carlin, who I miss dearly. And let's be honest, there are a lot of really stupid people in the world. Even just getting to this conference was testing my patience. The traffic in Manila, it took me an hour to go 5 kilometers from my hotel to the airport of Manila. And I thought, Jesus Christ, the traffic here would try the patience of Jesus Christ. And then even arriving here at the airport, you know, let's put the airport an hour outside the city. Let's not put in a spur line. Let's make people go stand outside in the heat, directly in the sun for 15 minutes and wait for the shuttle bus. Yeah, that's a really great way to welcome visitors and business travelers to your country. Another one of my favorite comedians, I've actually seen him live, Bill Engvall. His album is called Here's Your Sign, 20 years ago. I hate stupid people. They should have to wear signs so we wouldn't rely on them. So my topic then is the conflicted humanist. Someone who cares for and tries to save humanity, yet people drive me nuts. And I was at Michael Sherlock yesterday, shared Thomas Paine's quote, which I'd never heard before, but I thought really sums up pretty much all of us that are here. The world is my country, all mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion. So in that respect, I'm a humanist, but I'm also a misanthropic, conflicted humanist. So I get asked, why do I hate people? I think the real question is, why shouldn't I? Throughout history, human behavior has not exactly been all that inspiring, such as war, famine. Michael yesterday brought up Mao's Great Leap Forward. The Khmer Rouge in Cambodia that starves many of their people. And I think this doesn't need any explanation. So, who am I? As Wade said, my pen name is Diogenes Mayberry, and my book is Manifest Insanity. As Michael talked about yesterday with the fight against evolution. Why should you be militant atheist? So this was inspired by the creationists in the US who were constantly fighting evolution in the courts to bring it into the school system, to fight gay rights, to fight women's rights. And so I wrote my book, which is essentially a summary of archaeology, biblical history, textual criticism, trying to refute the arguments of the evangelical Christians, say, but it's in the Bible. I said, yeah, but this is why it's wrong. And like Michael, we met about 3 years ago when I first published my book. He contacted me and asked, you know, can I contribute to his blog? We've been together on a live webcast on YouTube called Mind of Atheist. which they don't actually do anymore. I've actually contributed an article to his blog on the human rights on apostasy. And I also had the privilege of being the very first ebook ever listed by the Richard Dawkins Foundation. And when they put me up, I was actually right next to the release of his book, An Appetite for Wonder. Sadly, when they revamped their website in the last year, I'm not there anymore, but still, it was a privilege that I was very proud to have earned. Unlike Michael, who's a militant atheist, I like to refer to myself as the humorous humanist, because I like to use sarcasm a lot, and I'm generally a big smartass, so when I see stupid shit, that kind of triggers my smartass response. However, we're both extremely vocal in our opposition to religion. So, getting into the history of humanism in Asia, this quote from the Vedas, around 1300 BC. Who really knows? And it's considered by some scholars to be the very first instance of agnosticism and skeptical thinking. From the Charvaka or Lokatya, if I mispronounce that, I apologize, around 600 BC. There is no other world than this. There is no heaven and no hell. The realm of Shiva and like religions are invented by stupid impostors. Now, this is a perception that holds that knowledge that embraces philosophical skepticism. It rejects the Vedas, supernaturalism, and this is considered an example of an atheistic school within the Hindu tradition. Buddha. Those of you who know the story of Buddha, that his father received a prophecy that he would either be a great king or a great teacher. So his father shielded him in the palace for most of his life. Eventually at 29, he got out of the palace and he saw an old man, and he was extremely depressed. This really upset him that people suffer, and drove him into the life of being an ascetic. And eventually, he realized that all life is suffering. The first noble truth of Buddhism, which Tatsi talked about yesterday, is that all life is suffering. Now, his teachings deny the authority of the Hindu Vedas, and with atheistic Buddhism is generally viewed as heterodox from the perspective of Orthodox Hinduism. However, if you can accept that all life is suffering, you can then overcome it by one following the Eightfold Path, that we can just recognize it. Now, in Zoroastrianism, Danny was asking yesterday, it's all, this Western philosophy. Well, most people don't really understand how much Zoroastrianism has dramatically influenced not only Judaism through when the Jews were freed by Cyrus the Great. Judaism underwent a dramatic shift, incorporating much of Zoroastrianism into it. And so Zoroastrianism is mainly the struggle between the truth and the lie, the emphasis on the freedom of the individual to choose right or wrong, and individual responsibility. So much of Zoroastrian philosophy has entered the West through its influence not just on Judaism, but on Middle Platonism. And they've been identified as early key events in the development of Western philosophy. So Danny, here's where part of Asia had inspired the West, which has then come back into Asia through, unfortunately, colonization and imperialism. Tatsi yesterday was mentioning Jedi, so as a smartass, this is some content I came up with about a month ago. Because religions and people tend to be short-sighted and forgetful. And so this is my vision of what's going to happen in 1,000 years when Judaism, Mormonism, and Scientology all merge together. Because they all kind of have this space element to it. So this is something I thought of about a month ago. And again, it's my vision of how I see what's going to happen in the next 1,000 years. So moving into China, the Zhou dynasty in the first millennium BCE, this was the origins of when native Chinese philosophy developed. Critical to that is the mandate of heaven, that a wise ruler is granted the permission to rule because he's a good ruler. Consequently, if you're a bad ruler, you lose your mandate. Again, Danny's asking, where is it in Asian culture? Well, here's a quote from Confucius. Courtesy, generosity, honesty, persistence, kindness. These things are good and will get you ahead in life. And people will rely on you. Also in Confucian are these 5 principles of Ren, which basically translate to humanism. The Zhengming, again, the mandate of heaven. Zhong, loyalty. Xiao, filial piety. And Li, ritual. Now, within the intellects, they stress the importance of ritual, but also the importance of Ren, your humaneness. And they are especially concerned with ethics, especially when it comes to politics. And along with legalism, it is generally held to be the origins of meritocracy, where it doesn't matter if you're born into a rich and wealthy family. If you're smart and you work hard and you're a good person, you can get ahead. So with legalism, in the talk yesterday on Sun Tzu or Lao Tzu? Sun Tzu, he was talking a lot about Shu. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's the same character I'm using in my talk. So under legalism, the legalists were the thinkers at the forefront of the administrative and socio-political innovation in China. The Qin era reforms, like the Confucian ideals, allowed the common people to gain in rank. And you have these 3 concepts: Fa Jia, laws, regulations; Shu, power and authority; and Shu, methods and strategy. Again, under Fa Jia, all people are equal before the law. Not just the common people, the kings, the mandarins, everyone. It's clearly written down in the law, and everyone. So this had the effect of weakening the power of the feudal lords and emphasizing strict obedience to a legal system. There's also Moism. And Mozi, who lived 470 to 391, about the same time as Confucius, and along with legalism, it's one of the 4 main pillars of the Chinese philosophic schools. It was a major rival of Confucianism. Its administrative thought was absorbed by legalism, and its canon was absorbed by the Taoists, and it's basically all but disappeared. And like the other 2, it's very similar that meritocracy is central to its thinking. It's not reserved for ancestral privilege. There's also this concept that Jian'ai, or universal love. However, it's a bit misleading because he wants to reevaluate behavior, not emotions. Now, he promoted a philosophy of impartial caring, that we should care equally for others, regardless of their status. And he is known for his insistence that we're all deserving of receiving material benefit and being protected. Morality, again, is not defined by tradition or ritual, but is a constant moral guide. Michael was just mentioning the Wu Wei from Taoism, which is essentially action through non-action. Now, Taoism is not overtly humanist. Now, while the other philosophers were talking about moral duty, Zhuangzi was basically talking about how to live a carefree life and just let life happen to you and just kind of flow with it like the water. So, moving into the modern age, Taiwan, where we are for this conference. The 3 principles were developed by Dr. Sun Yat-sen. It remains explicitly part of the platform of the Kuomintang and is a constitution in the Constitution of the Republic of China. The 3 principles: Minzu, nationalism, freedom from colonial imperialism; Minchuan, representative democratic government; and Minsheng, basically social welfare, taking care of your fellow man. It's been adopted in Tibet. The Tibet Improvement Party founded, here it says in 39, on the 3 principles, called for the overthrowing of the feudal system and seeking a modern secular society. Now, those of you who've seen Penn and Teller's bullshit that dealt with Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and the Lama system, they talk about how brutal the Lama system was. It was not, everybody thinks now that all these peaceful, no, this was a very, very, not just corrupt, but cruel regime, how they treated the locals. And the founder of that party had a great quote, that the Lamas were hopelessly ill-suited for the modern world. I would liken Tibet under the Lamas to living, what it was like living in Europe under the Vatican in the Middle Ages. It was very impressive. And so while China has had some cruelty, China has also brought schools and secularism to Tibet to some extent. In Vietnam, the Vietnamese Kuomintang also founded, foundation was also looking at Sun Yat-sen's 3 principles. It was their stated goal to run the country under the 3 principles. And Singapore, just last year, Tatsi and I were talking about this last night, only last year in Singapore was a political party founded on the 3 principles and 5 branches. So let's look at what's going on currently. Now, while Asia led in human rights, as we just saw in the first millennium BC, we're all pretty aware now that there's some pretty brutal human rights abuses going on in Asia. When I was researching, I came across the IHEU Freedom of Thought report, which goes through country by country. As it says, criticism can be categorized as hate speech. It's a crime to offend religious feelings in 55 countries. In 39, you can go to prison and you can be put to death in 6. Other laws affect holding public office. Some of these countries will require that you state your religion on your ID, your passport, or your national identification. And some benefits are restricted to only people of the appropriate religion. Now, according to Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes the freedom to hold opinions without interference and seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. And the countries with the worst records on freedom of thought are usually those countries with the worst record on human rights overall. 19 countries punish their citizens for apostasy. And of those, 12 is punishable by death. 13 countries, citizens can be put to death merely for expressing atheism. So this is a map that was taken from the IHEU report. And along here you can see their color category. Black, I've switched to white just to make it stand out. Notice the almost complete and utter lack of green for equal. You can't even see where it is. And according to the Wind Gallup International Association, religion has dropped by 9% and atheism has risen by 3% between 2005 and 2012. Now, while there's a distinct lack of green, those of you who live here in Taiwan will be pleased to know you're one of them. Canada actually ranked lower than the US, strangely enough, which is kind of shocking. Let me just jump back. Of the other 3 and equal, 4 are in Europe. Estonia, Kosovo, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and there's 3 in Oceania, Fiji, Kiribati, and Nauru. So Taiwan is in very short company. Now, looking at Taiwan, you have freedom of speech here. Now, I actually got into it on Friday with a friend of mine who lives here in Taipei. I flew in on EVA Air, and I went, really? Hello Kitty jets? Even the flight attendants have to wear Hello Kitty aprons. There were 18 pages in the duty-free magazine of Hello Kitty. It started in the duty-free with Hello Kitty. And she got really pissed off at me because I posted this. And she said, if you don't like Taiwan, don't come. And I said, freedom of speech. Taiwan is ranked as one of the freest countries in the world. I don't care. If you don't like it, don't come to Taiwan. And I said, if you don't like freedom of speech and opinions, try moving to China. And that shut her up. So, let's move on to some of the usual suspects here in Asia. I'm sure most of us know this quote from the movie. It's one of the most often used. So let's take a look at those countries that often come to mind when we think of human rights, usually because they're doing something stupid and they end up in the media. So Afghanistan, Their criminal code makes no specific reference to blasphemy, and the courts do rely on Islamic law. Blasphemy can include anti-Islamic writings or speeches, and it's a capital crime under some interpretations of Islamic law. For males over the age of 18 and females over 16 of sound mind, an Islamic judge may impose a death sentence for blasphemy. Similar to apostates, those accused of blasphemy are given 3 days to recant or face death. Bangladesh, which has been showing up quite frequently in the news because of the murder of the bloggers. It's almost weekly there seems to be an attack on bloggers in Bangladesh. As you can see, criticism of religion, you can go to jail for up to 10 years. According to their criminal code section 295A, you can go to prison for a deliberate or malicious intent to hurt religious sentiments. Even their laws are partially derived from the Quran. Marriage is restricted. If a Hindu wants to marry a Buddhist, they're not allowed to adopt. And homosexuality is illegal. This quote from Reporters Without Borders, that the desire to restrict freedom of expression and reinforce censorship in the name of combating blasphemy is basically done as a political tool to silence opposition, and it's unacceptable and contrary to the fundamental freedoms. Now, nearly 50 people have been murdered in Bangladesh since 2013. 4 of the online writers have been arrested on charges of hurting religious sentiment by writing against Islam. Now, does anybody expect Bangladesh's government to do anything about this and take the problem seriously? This is the quote from last April, just this, April, 3-4 months ago. Anybody who writes filthy words, why should we tolerate? It's not acceptable. This is characteristic fault of an expression of a distorted or a filthy mindset. So I would certainly not expect the government in Bangladesh to be doing anything about the murders of the bloggers anytime soon. Moving on to China, which those of you here in Taiwan are very well aware, and that's why you want to stay here and maintain your independence, are ranked as one of the gravest violators. Expressions of human interests and principles are brutally repressed. Democratic reform is violently subdued. Ironically, I can't remember, I might have been Tatsi yesterday was talking about China. There are 5 sanctioned religions in China, of which I thought this was interesting. There are no faith-based primary schools or secondary schools. However, you can have a faith-based university as long as you're one of the 5. And as they were mentioning yesterday, you actually have to be an atheist to be a party member. And as we all know, the media is heavily biased and censored by the government. India, you can go to jail for up to 3 years for hurting someone's feelings. Under their criminal code, 295, you can go to jail for insulting someone's beliefs. Whoever with deliberate and malicious intention of outraging the religious feelings of any class of citizens of India by words, spoken, written, or signs of visible representation, otherwise insults or intends to insult the religion or the religious beliefs of a class. Socially, there are taboos against being atheist or humanist. Their constitution, while being a secular republic, still protects freedom of thought and conscience. Does have some issues. Statistics have shown that intracommunal violence shows a 30% increase in the first half of 2015. Out of a total of 330 attacks, 51 have been fatal. Journalists continue to face a number of constraints, and the government has used security laws and criminal defamation legislation and hate speech laws to curb critical voices. Moving into Indonesia, where their constitution guarantees freedom of expression, but criticism is severely restricted and support for atheism is effectively banned. Article 29 is actually quite funny, because it contradicts itself. The state shall be based on the belief in one and only God, and we guarantee you the freedom to worship. Okay, as long as it's only our one God. Article 156A, it is illegal to promote other faiths or atheism, and punishes the dissemination of information aimed at inciting hatred or hostility. Also, you can see the government if you're not religious, you don't get to hold office. Like China, there are 6 official religions. And your identity, it's one of the countries where you must state your religion on your identity cards. However, in the last 10 years, you're allowed to have a minus sign. Now, it is illegal or unrecognized for persons who do not identify with the 6 to continue to experience official discrimination, often when it comes to family law, like in Bangladesh. If you fall in love with someone of the wrong religion, you're going to encounter some bureaucratic opposition. Iran. The government jails and executes dozens on charges of enmity against God. It's most often used as a punishment for political acts that challenge the regime on the basis that they are opposing Allah. Furthermore, the penal code criminalizes the insulting or cursing of Islamic prophets with the death sentence. Again, it's one of those countries where blasphemy or criticism can have you put to death, or being an apostate, you can go to death. As we all know, the Ayatollahs are the supreme authority, and their laws are largely based on the Quran. Even advocating for church-state separation is illegal. To identify as an atheist is illegal. Where's Sir Sylvester when we need him? Here's just a summary of what you can expect in Iran just for enjoying your sexual freedom. So, if you have adultery, and it's between 2 Muslim men, or a Muslim man and a woman, you get 100 lashes. If it's a non-Muslim man and a Muslim woman, you're taking your life into your hands. If it's a Muslim man and a non-Muslim woman, I don't really care what you do with those infidel women, do we? If you're a homosexual, look at this. If it's between 2 men, 2 Muslim men, you get 100 lashes without consummation. But if the non-Muslim party is the active party, he can be put to death. Also in Malaysia, it's another one of the countries where you have to identify your religion. Religious indoctrination is mandatory in most state-funded schools, and there are no secular alternatives. To advocate secularism or church-state separation is illegal. There's also control over family law and legislation, like in Bangladesh, like in Indonesia. The media is also very self-censoring. Books and films are censored. The media is actually owned, the private media is actually owned by allies of the government. Again, you can be barred from office. I believe it was Tatsi yesterday who was talking about the ethnic Malays. By their constitution, they are defined as Muslim, whether they are or not. You're ethnic Malay, you're Muslim. Too bad. They also restrict what kind of Islam can be practiced. All citizens over 12 must carry the MyCal identification card, which must state their religion. Now, this is in contravention to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, where states have no right to demand to know the religion of their citizens. Their penal code is punishable by up to life in prison or a fine just for criticizing religion. Apostasy is outlawed and punishable with a prison sentence. However, in these 2 states, you can be put to death. Some of you may remember back in 2014 this ridiculous court battle on the ban of the word Allah by non-Muslims. Because apparently, even though Allah only means God, only Muslims can use it. Christians and Jews aren't allowed to use it. Now, the appeals court, by this decision, found that the freedom to practice religion other than Islam is lawfully limited, because Islam is the national religion. Now, the Prime Minister states that all of us who are fighting for human rights are just doing it as a cover, that we're deviants. We reject any value system that encompasses religious norms and etiquettes. We do this on the premise of championing human rights. Now, when your Prime Minister is speaking at a Quran recital assembly, I'm thinking he's not very unbiased. Moving into Pakistan, we all know that's a very brutal regime right now. They have no specific criminal statutes against apostasy. However, in 2007, you can see they tried to pass a bill where they could punish men with death and women with imprisonment. However, it failed to pass. Again, it's another country where your religion must be stated on your identity documents. No religion is not accepted. They actually passed an anti-terrorism act that you can go to jail for 7 years just for inciting criticism of religion. Their penal code, chapter 15. Deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage religious feelings of any class by insulting its religion or religious beliefs. Part C bans the use of insulting remarks. 298 prohibits the people from saying anything that had the deliberate intent to wound religious feelings. Now, this is a word I coined about a year or two ago, blasphemy instead of blasphemy, because we're making fun of their imaginary friends. Now, under Chapter 15 of Pakistan's criminal code, someone like Michael Sherlock or myself could be arrested merely for showing up in Pakistan. Moving into the Philippines. I spoke last year in Manila, where I met Wade at the PATISCON conference on reason and humanism, on divorce and the biblical roots of the opposition to divorce, why it's misinterpreted. It's the only country in the world, other than the Vatican, which doesn't really count, because it's all priests and nuns, where you can't get divorced. The point I made last year in Manila is, Danny was asking me, because I was married to a Filipino. Well, did we have to just get an annulment, but we weren't married there? And the point I made last year in Manila is, what's the difference between a divorce and an annulment? It's a word game. All they're doing is just pretending you were never married and didn't have 10 kids. And yet they put their citizens through years of bureaucratic nightmare for nothing.
Right now, there's a bill filed by some amendments that's in the House of Representatives about an absolute divorce.
Yeah, we'll see if it passes. Again, with women's rights, again, Danny and I were talking about this. The RH bill, the reproductive health bill, finally passed in April 2014 after 14 years of a pitched battle by the Catholic Church against it. Now, it was finally passed, and the government said, screw you, we're going to use government money to fund family planning, reproductive health centers, including the right to abortions and mandating care, education services, reproductive health services and education in public schools.
The abortion thing is really not requiring that because the Constitution is...
Yeah. Now, the Catholic, as I mentioned, the Catholic Church vigorously fought this bill for 14 years. This is a quote from the chairman of the Episcopal Commission on Canon Law and the Catholic Bishops' Conference. More than 150 professors at the Ateneo University signed a petition in support of the RH bill. And this dickhead called for their trial on heresy. They should be investigated for heresy and fired for signing a petition in support of women's reproductive health. Ateneo is one of the most prestigious universities. It's also a Catholic university. Run by Jesuits. But notice, we don't allow teaching that is against the official teaching. Giving instruction against the teaching in the church, we need to investigate. And not just investigate for heresy and have them dismissed. Now, the university, being a bunch of giant pussies that they are, issued a public a PR statement saying, oh, we support opposition to the RH bill, even though the professors were for it. Not only did the Catholic Church fight it, they threatened the politicians who voted for it with excommunication. Under their criminal code, Section 4, Article 133, offending religious feelings. You can go to jail for almost 2.5 years For anyone who in a place devoted to religious worship or during the celebration of any ceremony shall perform acts notoriously offensive to the feelings of the faithful. Yes, this was used for the first time in January 2013 to convict Colorado Celdran because in 2010 he interrupted service in protest of the opposition against the RH bill. Danny and I were just talking last night. She was mentioning in her talk yesterday, why do women always seem to put each other down? And I mentioned there's a woman named Phyllis Schlafly. She's the woman in the US who fought against the Equal Rights Amendment, giving women equal rights. She fought against it. Those of you who've heard of Conservapedia, the conservative alternative to Wikipedia, that's run by her son. And I mentioned that Phyllis was just in the news, and I Googled it before I came up here. Just last month, she was criticizing Hillary Clinton. So why do we need a female president? Our greatest presidents have all been men. So, yeah, reproductive health and women's rights don't seem to be a very big thing in the Philippines. It's kind of frustrating to watch. Manny Pacquiao was condemned earlier in the year, in February, for calling homosexuals worse than animals. And as we all know, people who are generally the most vocal about things tend to be closeted, so this is a little meme I came up with. She was also mentioning how the colonial powers came in and took over the traditional religions and demonized them. So when I saw this, it really kind of made me laugh, because I was married to a Filipino from an indigenous headhunting tribe up in the mountains that only converted within the last 100 years. So when I saw this, that's the first thing I thought of. Because not only did they go from not pointing and laughing, they actually became devout Catholics. Saudi Arabia, where do we start? Wahhabism is functionally recognized as a state religion. It's one of 12 countries given the worst possible rating for both political rights and civil liberties by Freedom House. It is routinely and severely criticized by many human rights organizations for its poor treatment of migrant workers, massive and political suppression of freedom of thought, association, women's rights, as well as maintaining an unfair and unpredictable judicial system. Again, it's a country where criticizing or leaving your faith can have you put to death. It's illegal to advocate separation of church and state. Religious indoctrination is not only utterly pervasive, it's coercive, fundamentalist, and extreme. And blasphemy, it's conceived as a deviation from Sunni Islam. So even other forms of Islam, Shia, Sufi, they will consider you apostates as well. In March 2014, the government brought into law new anti-terrorism legislation, Article 1, calling for atheist thought in any form, or calling you to question the fundamentals of the Islamic religion on which the country is based. You can be considered a terrorist. Married men are prohibited from engaging in homosexual acts. Men are prohibited from engaging in homosexual acts. They can be stoned to death for sodomy. Other punishments tend to include chemical castration, imprisonment, or execution. Moving into Singapore, the last one actually surprised me. I didn't know it was illegal to own a private satellite dish in Singapore. So, hey, you know, the state only wants you to get your news from one place. Was it last year? That kid, it was like that 15-year-old kid, got arrested for criticizing Lee Kuan Yew and religion. So just for posting YouTube videos, this kid got arrested. Religious indoctrination is not permitted. Again, there are principal religions. It's not a state religion, but there are Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism. Ironically, Pew ranks it as the most religiously diverse country in the world. And there was a court case a year or two ago, in 2014, the court case that overturned homosexuality in Singapore.
2007, that made lesbianism legal.
Yeah, but just within the last 2 years, there was the court case on homosexuality that it was illegal between men.
And it's still illegal between men, but they're not going to enforce it. That's what it's saying.
Okay. And in Thailand, where the government essentially supports state support for Buddhism, speech likely to insult Buddhism, you can go to jail for 7 years. We've heard of these people being arrested just for criticizing the monarchy. So, finally, it would seem that Asia led the way in humanist values in the first millennium BCE, but has massively regressed in the modern era. And along with George Carlin, Robin Williams was probably the biggest influence on my sense of humor. When he died, I was really upset. This quote from John Lloyd, one of the Blackadder producers, summed up my life. It just crystallized everything I felt in my whole life. Creative people don't feel like that. Those of us who want to change the world tend to suffer for it. So while I am a conflicted humanist, I still strive to make the world a better place than I found it. And Michael Bigelow and I, were in the Skeptics Pub in Hong Kong. The next one, those of you who can make it to Hong Kong, I will be giving a talk that I gave to the Unitarian Church back in March on heaven, hell, and the afterlife, dogmatic origins and evolutions of the Abrahamic religion. So if you can make it to Hong Kong at the end of August, please come join us for the Skeptics Pub. And I'll take your questions. Michael.
Okay, you raised really good points with regards to the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that grants freedom of expression. One of the biggest problems with that covenant is that it's not mandatory for member states to ratify and sign. Saudi Arabia hasn't ratified it, but even countries that have, if you read subsections, for example, Article 18, subsections, I think, 3, has a morality clause. So if free expression conflicts with morality, it's not protected by this covenant. And also parents have the right to indoctrinate their children with their religion under, I think, subsection 4 of Articles 18 and 19. And so that childhood indoctrination you're talking about, I think, in Malaysia and other countries like that. And I was talking with Rana in Pakistan, it's the same. Parents heavily indoctrinate their children, and the system helps them do that, which is a form of child abuse in many cases. I think personally the problem is that even if member states who do ratify this covenant on civil and political rights, these subsections need to be eliminated so that there is actual freedom of expression, because subsections 3 and 4 of Articles 18 and 19 of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights essentially nullify subsection 1, the first subsection. It takes all of the value out of that. But yeah, I think you raised some really good issues. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Jason. Something stood out in my mind is that many of the governments that we would view as being very repressive all have strict blasphemy laws, and there are countries that have more than one registered religion. So I'm wondering, is there any data to be able to kind of unthread or unweave whether or not they're using those laws to protect one religion, or if they're being applied fairly across all? So like if it's Bangladesh and it's majority Islam, if somebody who is a Muslim says just hateful things against Christians, are they prosecuted, or is this pretty much just something that gives cover for people that are bad-mouthing Islam?
As the Reporters Without Borders stated, when these blasphemy laws are used, it's generally against people who are being critical of the political regime. So it's used not to silence people who are opposing different religions or vocal criticism, not the non-majority religion. it's usually just a tool to silence political opposition in most cases.
Just to pick up on that point, actually, how far, I mean, you often hear this debate, how far do you think religion is the driver behind these laws compared to political power, trying to hold on to political power? In some of these countries that you talk about, is it religion that brings this about, or is it the desire to hold on to power?
I think it's because, Michael said yesterday, we tend to be sheep. Right? Religion is abused, and the government knows this is a nice, handy tool that we can use. We can use religion, and the people will get behind it. So the politicians are probably just being smart about it and using religion. Whether they themselves are offended by it, probably not. I think it's just a convenient, bullet in their arsenal to use, and to get the popular support behind them for it.
Earlier in your speech, you showed a map. I think it was about religious tolerance and freedoms.
Yeah, the IHEU, it's the Freedom of Thought report from the IHEU.
Okay, I contest some parts of it because I'm looking at my own country. I'm from New Zealand, and it's red. I can tell you for a fact it's a very religiously free country. I mean, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster that was referenced yesterday is an official religion in New Zealand.
Yeah. Now, the issue of that is you are ranked on whatever your worst law is. So if you have a blasphemy law in any sense of the way, like Australia would now probably have fallen down that list. So it doesn't matter on your freedoms in general. That whatever your worst performance is, that's how you get ranked. That's why Canada's quite
pretty silly scale. I agree with some of those countries should be red, the ones that you have spoken more about. But for my country's sake, no, I think we agree, man.
There would be something in there.
Yes, Australia too. I've lived in both countries.
I have the report. It's on my USB. Maybe over lunch we can pull it.
Yeah, I'll take a look. But I think it's a bad scale to look at it. And say, oh, New Zealand's got some ancient law that says men can't be married, whatever, that therefore makes us, like...
I don't think you say, I just report it.
Sure.
Hi, I just wanted to know, it's interesting to see you've done a lot of research by the look of it about the blasphemy laws. And I'm wondering, where would you refuse to go or not be able to go because you're quite a vocal person with your atheism? And because I take it that unless these countries have laws which they don't really use, you're probably in grave danger of visiting some of these countries.
Yeah, I would think definitely Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. Just the fact that I'm here talking to Taiwan and I mentioned China, and I do go to China often on business, I'm presuming that... I noticed yesterday we have all these cameras up there. There's a lot of surveillance in the room. So I imagine we're being watched in China. So I might even get detained. Like, I don't know if you heard about it in Hong Kong. 5 publishers in Hong Kong were disappeared from Hong Kong. So when I go back to the Skeptics Club talk at the end of August, I might just fall off the map. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely wouldn't go to Pakistan or Saudi Arabia.
Any more questions?
Just a comment. Could you flip back to one of those slides? Did I see a superhero or something?
Yeah, the blasphemy? Yeah. That was from, I stole that from South Park. That's a South Park graphic.
Okay, just wanted to see that again. Yeah. I have this thought this morning that, remember we had that group photo out there yesterday of all the speakers of this conference. We could do something like this too, but it's the Atheist League with all the superhero friends.
Yeah.
Whenever we can Photoshop ourselves into the superhero that we want.
Yeah, when I posted this on my own personal Facebook page, one of my friends in Hong Kong he's a very well-known, he's a satirist and journalist. He's also very devout evangelical. And he's like, oh, you atheists, you're so striped. You're just as dogmatic as the Christians. Yeah. And I'm like, did I insult one of your imaginary friends? As I said, I tend to be a smart ass. This kind of stuff, this is what pops into my head at 3 in the morning. Oh, another question back.
I just had a question about, you did mention that in China, atheism is given preference.
The Communist Party members are technically required to be atheists.
So it corresponds to a system where you would have a state religion and they tolerate other things if they're officially registered. In this case, we have a state belief or lack of belief that everyone will subscribe to if they want to advance, but they tolerate some other things.
Well, one of the reasons why the Chinese Communist Party wants you to be atheist is one, it's a competing ideology, and two,
what's a competing ideology?
And two, the Christian Church, and I was talking to a friend about this in Hong Kong on Friday, she's, why the Christian Church? Because there was just an article in the Hong Kong SCMP on Friday with the Catholic Church cracking down on Christians. And I said, yeah, you know why the Communist Party is scared of the Christians? Because there's more of them than there are of the Communist Party. And this kind of Michael's article on Stalinism and Hitlerism, these atheists are big and bad. I'm like, no, they just replaced one ideology, oneism, with another. They just got rid of Catholicism or Orthodox, and they just made it Stalinism, they made it Hitlerism, Nazism. They just took one and replaced it with another. That's all they did. They just maybe happened to be atheists, but it wasn't Mao's atheism that led him to inspire the Great Leap Forward and kill 50 million people. It was just a really stupid idea.
So, what did you think about the Nepal? Because you have to research for so many countries, right? So you didn't mention anything about Nepal. So
yeah, because Nepal doesn't really come up in the news as being particularly impressive. They're not up killing bloggers. So I did the usual suspects. The countries that are showing up in the news on a regular basis for suppressing freedom of speech, killing people and stuff. Nepal tends to be much more friendly. Come hiking. Try not to kill yourself when you're going up and out.
Do you have anything to add that is different?
Anything you'd like to say about Nepal?
no.
Okay.
Let's make a point about China because I teach mainlander kids online, and there's this thing where they don't even know the meaning of the word God or religion or belief they don't even know the concept until I teach it to them in English. So and this was a running trend around some maybe 40 students I had in the past, and so I can probably extrapolate from that in China it's not the freedom of thought, the lack thereof, it's not religiously motivated. It's politically motivated. So when you say freedom of thought, it's not all about religion. It can be a mishmash of other things.
Other questions?
Yeah, I didn't think that question was fully developed. I see some remnants of perhaps things are not answered, the China question. But I think it is in the manifesto, isn't it? The Communist Manifesto that atheism is sort of in there. That there's no belief in God.
It's been 25 years since I've actually read the Communist Manifesto in my first year of poli-sci class. I think again, was it you referred to? It's the opiate of the masses.
Yep, opiate of the masses. Not sure if it's a different document altogether, but that's a Marx. Yeah, it's a different document. But yeah, I did this kind of start from there, and then the Communism Manifesto. I think in order to have that be an ism, okay, for the people, for running a country, I think the base is still pretty much a non-belief system. That having said, it is why the Falun Gong thing, stupid as it is, really irked him so much because there were so many officials that had that religion, and it was uncovered quite suddenly when they decided to protest one day in front of Zhongnanhai, and that really took him by surprise.
Yeah, and in the Skeptics Pub in Hong Kong, we had a speaker who was talking about Qi, wasn't it? The speaker who came in and talked about Qi, and was talking about Falun Gong, and that they were getting so strong, there were so many followers, that they became a threat to the Communist Party, and that's why they cracked down on it. Last one.
Just a little local perspective to kind of back up some of these comments. I work in China almost every day, and I talk with people about religion and about atheism, and people really don't care. They see some of the cultural stuff as cultural. Western religion, a lot of them view as just completely foreign or nonsense if they get into the details. But the government's primary concern is people getting together to have thoughts and conversations in a big way outside of their control. So, I mean, I've had my driver tell me, if I got 1,000 people to come to my house to talk about how good the president was, I'd probably be arrested. They don't want big groups. They don't want people having mass conversations, and that's what religion does. When you get together for a religious meeting, you're talking about something that's outside the realm of the government wants you talking about.
All right, then let's give Jason a big thanks.